Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Brenny Larson, and today I have brought the expert Dr. Feng Shui, Yasha Jampolsky, in so you can understand what all this five elemental makeup that we're talking about exists in you and everyone around you, so you can understand yourself and choose friends and business partners wisely. Hey, Yasha, you ready to jump in?
I'm ready, Brenny.
Just so you know, it's only been an hour and 11 minutes, which is good numbers, 111, that we've been trying to get the presentation going. The technology gremlins are out. So, guys, if this isn't the smoothest presentation, welcome to the world. Take it away, Yasha.
Well, Brenny, what I wanted to do is to, as you know, four pillars is vast. So I want to touch on a very specific part of the four pillars process. And this, I like to call this presentation Demystifying Four Pillars. I want to make it simple so that everyone can understand what we're talking about. What we're going to be covering today is the day master and five elements balance. Okay, and if you would go to the next slide. A very important thing when you create a four pillars chart is understanding that even in Asian calendars, there's a solar and a lunar calendar. And the one that we use for astrology is a solar one, always. And this is not to say that one calendar is better than the other. It's based on a simple fact that ancient Chinese was an agrarian society based on farming cycles, and they believed that all the chi on the planet came from the sun. So whenever important calculations were involved, they followed the solar calendar. And the solar calendar begins the midpoint between the winter solstice and spring equinox. This year it took place on February 4th at 6:14 p.m. was the beginning of the solar year. Next. Four pillars, as I mentioned before, is a very powerful tool. It reveals the subtle aspects of character, personality, and physiology. It makes you more aware of conscious and unconscious forces that operate within your own dynamic. This is a very important aspect of this because often people go through the world and they have their goals. They're very aware of all the goals that they've grown up with and they think about and they dream about. They may not be aware of certain underlying forces. This is where four pillars comes in. We're able to go deeper in and come up with information. Success in today's world is about information. We live in an information-driven society. And this is, to me, this is the other internet. We get lots of our news and everything else from the internet, lots of our knowledge from the internet. This is a way to reach beyond the internet and reach the individual's subconscious and higher consciousness. And if you believe in a higher being, often you can reach the person's connection to a higher being. If not, you can simply think of it as it's the soul's urge, it's the heart's urge. And within that information, a person can make much better choices. Next.
You know, Yasha, what it did for me when Yasha did my chart, I believe it was 2012, Yasha.
Yes, can you believe it? Time flies.
Guys, and I do always have my chart around to remind me of things. But what it did for me personally is it took all this weight off my shoulders. I literally felt this like burden be released off of me because it validated I am exactly who God or the universe intended me to be. My elemental makeup, when Yasha went through my chart, it was like, oh, can you call my parents and explain to them? Because my sister's chart is completely opposite, obviously. That's why you can have children, and you do have children born in the same family that are completely opposite. You don't exist of the same elements or the same percentages of elements. So
yes.
That's the one thing it did for me. It gave me permission that I am supposed to be big and bold. I am the thunder trigram. I'm a wood element. I mean, by doing my chart like Yasha, I'm 70% earth. That makes total sense why I am the way I am and how much I love nature. And I never would have understood that I have 0 fire in my chart. We'll talk about this stuff later, but I want you to understand this is going to give you permission to accept yourself for who you are and to make the little tweaks you need to tweak to be a better human being. But don't you really feel that way? It makes me feel so good about myself.
Absolutely, because for one thing, you're getting a confirmation that everything you ever believed about yourself, there's a basis for it. You know, there's another record of it somewhere else that says the same thing that life's been saying to you all along. And often, you know, we have opposing forces, parents that tell us what to do, bosses that tell us what to do, society that tells us what to do. And when you realize there's an actual map and architecture of who you are, all of a sudden it's okay to be completely yourself. And I have to add, as a parent who's raised 2 kids who are now 18 and 22, in the beginning it was so challenging. And then I started using the 4 pillars natal charts for guidance. And I have 2 wonderful children. I can't really take full credit. All that 4 pillars did, it allowed me to figure out the best way to stay out of their way so that they could grow in the way that they needed to grow. Next, please, Brenny.
I already flipped it.
Oh, you did? Okay. So this is just a little bit more information about 4 pillars. It provides clarity and guidance. You know, when we get down to a consultation, I'm able to get down and talk about specifics in a person's life and really have them share their wants and their desires and their hopes and help them get to that point. Next, please. So one of the things that I really pride myself on is I've been a student of pure principles for all kinds of metaphysics and other things like that. And I've been a student of metaphysics in a way that I always look for pure principles. Pure principle is simply laws of nature that can be applied universally. And often you will find similar principles that exist in many, many, many cultures. If you study the ancient Egyptians, they're going to have their version of feng shui. You study the Mayans and they have their version of it. And there are certain laws that work universally. And when I find that, it's a lot more powerful for me. These are some of the other things that come into play. Laws of attraction and reflection, which influence everything. Sacred geometry and numerology, which again provide guidance that's a little more tangible, and creates a framework that we can work with. And then there are all the ancient mystic sciences, including 4 pillars and feng shui and many of the other Asian sciences and from other cultures. Next, please, Brenny.
Well, first of all, everybody knows I totally dig sacred geometry and numerology because I just believe everything is numbers in the universe. Everything's feng shui because everything's made of energy and everything is numbers. So that's, I think, why I was so attracted to it.
And these are the secret languages, you know, the secret languages of nature, numerology and astrology. So just a little bit about the origins. Since the beginning of time, since humans could communicate with each other, even before that, they sought ways to access information that went beyond what was in front of their nose. They understood nature and they followed nature and they tuned into nature, but they wanted to know so much more. So various traditions of divination occurred. Even in China, there were several, many of them based around the I Ching, and grew out of that. There were other types of, and I put that in quotation marks, astrologies, because these are not pure astrologies. These are cosmological systems of divination. And out of these, I found I resonated the most with 4 pillars, which is also called the Bazai, and a few other names that it's well known as. Next, please.
I want to make a comment on this again.
Please.
You guys, the thing about what he's talking about is the ancients, not just the Chinese, India, Vedic astrology, all this type of thing, Western astrology, everything is based on the stars and the planets because we understand that this all has an impact on us. Yes, the moon has an impact on us. That is the waves of the ocean, right? Going in, tides of the ocean going in and out. So what you find is that they really did research, and I did research on the Chinese astrology and found out that one of the reasons, Yasha, that they use the animals the way they do is because they couldn't explain the energies of the elements. So they knew if they put it with an animal, people would understand it.
Exactly.
And I just think that's so wonderful and interesting.
And we call that metaphorical language, which is basically something that represents something else that is a lot easier for us to wrap our brains around. And metaphors are very widely used in all methods of divination, whether it's tarot cards or astrology, etc.
For example, when you say I have 2 ox in my chart, and I'm a Taurus and an ox by my elements of my astrology, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that I may be stubborn. I may put my foot down at times, but I do plow through obstacles. So do you see by just us saying an animal, like if you're a dog or a pig or a monkey, like monkeys, what do monkeys like to do? They like to play and have fun. When you understand just these simple little things about yourself and the others around you, we call it looking through your feng shui eyes.
Yes, and we also call the individual characters archetypes because you have something that represents a whole group of energetic movements. But also, Brittany, I wanted to tell you, if you have 2 ox in your chart, I think you need a bigger barn.
A bigger bar?
Bigger barn.
Oh, he knows I make choke cherry wine, and my dad gave me a bar when he moved, and I'm like,
oh no, not a bigger barn. You have to build a bigger barn.
Barn.
My failed attempt at humor. So anyway, to talk a little bit about the difference between Eastern sciences and modern and Western science. As you probably all know, when the way that Western science operates is in this day and age is somebody sponsors an experiment for something, and usually there's money involved. It has to do with a product they're selling, and they sponsor an experiment to try to prove or disprove. And often when you do that, you're tainting the results immediately. The difference with Asian science is that observation was their primary tool, and they would observe things for years, decades, hundreds of years. And out of this, after a while, when they were sure of how things were moving, they would make a statement about it. They would write it down, and it would be passed on. And out of this grew the 10,000-year almanac. And what they observed were the many, many cycles of time. And these were organized in a numerological fashion, and they were arranged around what you see here, which is yin-yang, 5 elements, and 12 animal energies. And by the way, it wasn't until later that they developed the animal names, because earlier on, this kind of astrology was carried on by the village shamans, and they didn't really want their people to understand the process. They would just sit down with somebody and say, this is what you have to do, this is, see this. They didn't explain things. They didn't care. It wasn't until later, when people took an interest, that these animal signs developed so that people would understand it.
Yasha, it seems they were very secretive about a lot of things back then, but you really have to look at it because, from the feng shui perspective, not the astrology perspective, but feng shui perspective, everything is passed down verbally through the lineage, through the monks.
Yes.
There were no feng shui books. You're not going to find a feng shui book from 10,000 years ago or 5,000 years, or even probably 100 years ago, because it was all passed down verbally.
So, and a lot of people couldn't read either.
Right, but what a time we're living in. Not only do we have the opportunity to be able to use these tools, which are fantastic, but now, they're able to be presented, and you can look at books and see things, because think if 70% of the people are visual, and everything was passed down verbally.
Yes.
It's pretty powerful. But what I wanted to make a note of for y'all to understand, the secret of secrets of this information is especially in feng shui, that they passed it down verbally, and if you didn't get it, you weren't meant to get it, and that was it. And the emperor would often, you know, feng shui had to go underground. Let's put it like that, because think if the emperor knew you could manipulate and move energy. I don't like the word manipulate. Change energy by the tools of feng shui. That he was fearful that they would overtake him. So wasn't it great to be feng shui back then? I think we're living in the best time to be a feng shui practitioner.
Absolutely. And you also have the benefit there are people like myself and Brenny who are happy to explain things to you, who have studied and happy to explain. So back to what I mentioned about metaphors. Metaphors are a way that our brains understand and absorb things a lot more clearly. And that's really a lot of the symbology that you see in Four Pillars is metaphorical. And once you start to grasp it, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but these animals, they're my friends. I look at a natal chart and I get visual images. It's almost like a movie is playing when I look at the chart. Next, please, Brennan. So this is a typical Four Pillars chart. And I wanted to show you the various things that you're going to see in a Four Pillars chart. The most important aspect of the chart is the day master or self-element. And it's delineated here in blue lettering. And it's in the day pillar. You'll notice there are 4 pillars, hence the 4 pillars, a year, a month, a day, and an hour. And each one of them has an animal of its own. And each one of them has a series of elements. The animal of the lower part of the chart are referred to as the earthly branches, and the upper parts are referred to as the heavenly stem. The day master is the most important and significant heavenly stem in the chart. And it will tell you a lot about the person, just understanding that. And this is sort of what we're going to try to get to today. Okay, next, please. So yin yang is a very important aspect also. There are 5 elements, and each one of them has a yin and a yang aspect, and that creates 10 elements altogether. And these are called the 10 heavenly stems, or the 10 gods. And here you get a sense of what yin and yang is, a little bit about it. Yin and yang is a forever study that you can always find out more information about it. Next, please. The 5 elements cycle, and any of you that have been following Brenny for a while have probably had an earful of 5 elements.
They can teach the 5 elements, brother.
And she does a great job at it. But, you know, the most significant thing is really that there are, these are cycles that reflect, in this little diagram, the entire story of how energy moves through the universe is contained. You know, and there are 3 cycles. You have a productive cycle, you have a reducing cycle, and you have a controlling cycle. And from these, we are able to learn a lot about how to use elements as cures, how to use them as remediation, how do we use them to improve our lot in life, how to strengthen ourselves, when we have too much, how to reduce, and etc.
So guys, I want to quickly go through the 3 cycles for those of you that are new to feng shui. So if you look at the chart, he's got all the cycles in there. So the cycle that he calls, do you call it nourishing? Nourishing cycle would be like water feeds wood, which means you water a plant. Wood feeds fire. Fire makes earth, earth makes the metal, and metal holds water. That's a nourishing cycle. If you have too much, you want the controlling cycle. And the controlling cycle is the star. And the controlling cycle goes, so like an axe chops wood, wood uproots the earth, earth muddies water, water puts out fire, and fire melts metal. Now, if you want to do a reducing cycle, that means you're going to do this outside circle here, which like fire is the child of wood, meaning wood feeds fire. So wood comes out, fire comes out of wood. So to take away the fire aspect, you would add what comes out of it. So you would add earth to cool I don't want to say cool the fire, to
So
reduce the element.
yeah, if you should have too much of an element, for example, someone who has too much fire is just going to be kind of jumpy and moving around in ways that may not serve them. So you want to reduce the fire a little bit. You add a little bit of earth. If the fire is really intense, you would do something like use water, because water is the controlling element for fire, and that would reduce it in a very large way.
Boom.
Boom.
Okay, everybody that follows me, you have your chart also, so they understand all of this. I will make sure to post the chart on the replay page. You'll be watching the replay right now if you're listening to this. So there's a 5 elemental chart that goes with all of this to follow along and keep it forever. We use it for everything.
Yes, and you can see here the yang. This is really the order of the cycle, the way that the elements appear in the 60 cycles that form the 4 pillars. That's the basis. Yang wood comes first. Why? Because yang wood is east, and everything begins in the east because the sun comes over the horizon in the east, followed by yin wood and yang fire, yang earth, yang metal, yang water, and then back to yang wood again. And the cycles continue. And as you can see here, we have
and clickers.
Yeah.
See why he wanted to control the slideshow, people?
As you can see here, each one of these, the 10 heavenly stems, is related to an organ system. And the way that we look at it when we do your 4 pillars chart, if you have an excess of one thing and not enough of another, it could create an imbalance in that organ system. Often I see charts where there are imbalances in several of the organ systems. Because this is not really my area, what I do is I refer them to a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner or an acupuncturist with the information from the chart and say, why don't you have them check that meridian or this meridian or the other meridian, and hopefully nothing has happened yet, and the person dealing with it can just take whatever measures are necessary to keep those organ systems healthy.
Okay, so for example, it doesn't, once again, take a rocket scientist to figure out if I have 70% earth and 0% fire, that's an imbalance of some sort.
Yes.
I'm a yin earth day sign. So tell me, what does that mean? What do I have to look out for at 70% earth and 0 fire?
What it would really mean is that when your systems are stressed, and that could be emotional stress, it could be stress from work, it could be physical stress, it could be something like you get the flu and your whole body is stressed.
Mm-hmm.
You will tend to have materialized symptoms in if you're yin, or well, I would look at the entire chart, because even though your day master is yin earth, I would see how many yins, how many yang earth you have in your natal chart, and we'd be able to, we could look for trouble. You would expect that when you're stressed, the stress would go to your abdominal area, and you would have some kind of systems, some kind of symptoms, whether it's in your intestinals or in your stomach, or
would it be like my solar plexus, because I do chakra work myself also, because everything's part of the puzzle. Would that impact my chakra? Because literally,
absolutely,
my gut will tighten up so hard, and it's like, can it just be my chakra?
Well, there's another thing. When you have so much earth in the chart, people who have a lot of earth tend to build up a bit of a belly. And the reason that happens is it helps to shield their chakra because it is an area that's out of balance. The excessive body that we build there will serves as protection from ambient energies that may be going in and unconsciously people will sort of protect that area, and very often, this is is kind of an interesting thing, Brandy. I don't know if I ever told you about, we ever discussed this, but people who have a lot of earth are earth is the element of transformation. They're often engaged in the kind of work that has to do with helping people transform their lives. Big surprise, right? But there's another aspect to it. People who are like this have a certain level of sensitivity that allows ambient energies in at a very rapid pace. People who tend to be intuitive, who tend to be psychic, etc., need a certain amount of protection, and very often you will get a little bit of a Buddha belly, And I've heard.
I thought it was menopause.
Yeah, you thought it was because you're eating too much, and it's not. It's the Buddha belly.
That's what my 3-year-old nephew says. The Buddha belly.
And this is sort of our body's way to adapt to a high level of sensitivity. So one of the ways that this can be addressed in the real world is to sort of find out where the imbalances are and apply elemental cures. And this is why people who tend to get bellies have a lot of success getting, reducing their bellies by working with acupuncturists, because they can work directly with the energetic systems.
Not only is he talking about the physical aspect of the earth element, but an aspect of the earth element is like we love to be outside, and me with having, dragons and oxes in my chart, that's earth energy. I would be happy being outside all the time. And in fact, half the time I do my classes sitting outside. So just learning these little bit of things about you yourself, it's just really helped me like myself that much more. And that's one of the toughest things to do in this world, isn't it? To really love yourself and accept yourself for who you are.
And also, if you're locked in your office and you spend a couple of hours on your computer, and your body and your mind and everything, so get outside. It's part of your health system. You don't have to feel guilty about it. It's part of your mental health and emotional health and physical health.
Right, and I knew that, and Yasha knows what happened to me, so I did not apply this because circumstances happened, and I ended up working all on my own again, so I ended up working at the computer too much. And what happened is my hips and my pelvis locked up from sitting too much. But we also know what that area is, right? Look at your chart. You guys look at your Bhagwa. What is the pelvis area? Oh, wealth, abundance, and good blessings, right?
Yes.
So do you see how this kind of all plays together, people? Everything is a little piece of the puzzle, and they all work together. That's why there's no right or wrong feng shui, no school of feng shui that's better than another. It's what resonates with you. They all use yin yang. They all use the 5 elements. The 3 lux. There's 99% of it's the same. It's really just, to me, how they lay the Bhagwa out. But otherwise, what Yasha does, this is just tools to help you understand yourself and your family better. If your parents, you want to know these things for your children. He did a chart for my 3-year-old nephew, and yes, the little dragon is a handful and takes an entire community to raise him, as you predicted, Dr. Feng Shui.
Absolutely. It does take a community. It does take a village. So this is what a health chart looks like at the bottom of your 4 pillars report. And it'll give you a percentage of each of the energies. And there are certain, like for example, this one here, which is very strong wood, you can see that the gallbladder and the liver are affected. I would go back to the natal chart to see if it's yin or yang, and to get a better sense. But usually when you have very strong wood, you often have a condition of having an inflamed liver. And this is really someone that it's highly recommended that they don't drink alcohol and don't ingest sugar, because sugar and alcohol are extremely inflammatory to the liver. And the liver is also linked with the emotion of anger. So is it any accident that when people get too drunk, they're angered? Not everybody, but certain people, every time they drink, their anger comes out. They become so angry about everything. And
Guys, because they're adding fire to the wood and it's burning them up, and they're gonna snap.
Exactly.
I know one well, don't I?
Yeah. And the simple laws of nature are, if you stress the system, eventually it's going to blow up, and we don't really want, these are loving parts of our body, these organ systems. We want to always treat them lovingly and with care and give them the best possible treatment that we can muster and that is available for them.
So what would you tell this person? What would you suggest for this person? Don't go do shots of tequila. Don't be drinking sugar in your coffee.
You should never drink. Alcohol is one of the most toxic substances. I don't want to be a party pooper, but it's one of the most toxic substances that we put into our bodies on a regular basis. And some people can get away with it, but someone with this amount of wood in their chart is really playing with fire. And I would recommend drink. And they also avoid sugar. Sugar is, in a lot of ways, it can be just as toxic and addicting as alcohol. So someone with a lot of wood in it, and this is not just someone who's a wood element. Someone can be another. I know someone of their water element, but the most predominant element in their chart is wood. They have 40% wood. And even though water is a self-element, only 20% water. So they have a lot of the overly strong wood issues with the gallbladder and liver. And some of the others that are important, fire is heart, earth is stomach, spleen, pancreas, metal is large intestine and lung, and water is bladder and kidney. So if this is a very normal chart, but let's say this was someone who had a very high percentage of bladder and kidney or water energy, it would not be a problem. If they had a very weak kidney bladder meridian, they would be prone to kidney infections, bladder infections, etc. So in some of these cases, if the balance is high, it's not a problem, and it's only a problem if it's low. In other cases, if the balance is high, in the case of wood or liver, gallbladder, liver meridian, it is very problematic. So each one of these are handled differently, and I try to, as much as possible, encourage people to take it to a full-on health practitioner, because they have so many more tools available for balancing directly what the body is doing.
I just want to make a comment about this. One of the reasons I brought Yasha on is because we went through Mingguan, we went through the 5 archetypes, and we did a lot of studies like that, and people were very confused because they're like, I'm not, let's say, resonating with my Mingguan number. And I said, well, I've got to bring Yasha on because that's just a tiny little piece of the puzzle. What he does is he goes in depth. To me, the most important thing is to understand and get your percentages of your elements. Totally understand the world a whole lot better when I understood the percentages of the elements. How I coach my students and how I look at myself. And in fact, Yasha, Justine, one that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit, she had her chart in front of her. And when I was coaching her, I was able to look at her surroundings, and I was able to listen to her words and understand how she was like self-sabotaging herself from reaching her goals and dreams, because you get comfortable in certain situations. And that's why I wanted to bring this in, because if you did your Mingguan and you're like, man, I don't know, I don't feel like a wood element. When Yasha does your chart and you find your day sign and your percentages, and you even just look at that chart, you'll start to understand things from a whole nother perspective. Me personally, my acupuncturist loves that I understand the 5 elements. You better believe I took my chart in. I didn't really have to take my chart in because he could probably figure pretty much out with my numbers, because my numbers are so wacko-cracko, aren't they? I have 0 fire, 5% wood, 15% water, 10% metal, and 70% earth. So he understands the 5 elements from the aspect of the meridians and the network, the organ network that is he needs to look at for me. So that's why I wanted to bring Yasha in, A, to clear up confusion, and B, understand how this tool helps you to be healthy and helps you to understand yourself and make smarter choices.
Great, Brenny. So so what I usually do when I teach a 4 Pillars workshop is I like to use, before we start to get into individual charts, I like to use some well-known people as examples so that we can look at their charts and sort of, people know who they are and how they behave, and that you can start to see the correlation within the chart. But also, this is an opportunity to look at all the information that's in a typical natal chart. And this is Mark Zuckerberg's chart. And what we see here is first is his day master element, which is Yang Earth, and he's born in a Yang Wood rat year, and the hour of birth is Yang Fire Dragon. So this is a profile of someone, first of all, being a rat. He's someone who's very strategic, very good at organizing things, and very good at manipulating other people to do what he wants them to do. And underneath it all, and he has, and some people might disagree, that he has a snake in his month, and that he has the wisdom of the snake to help him with all of this. So this immediately made him an excellent sort of person for the position that he's in, the head of this massive empire. And he built it from nothing, but he just kept on going. A lot of people would have been satisfied with what he accomplished the first few years. And the reason he's not satisfied is because if you look at his hour pillar, he's got a dragon in there. And dragons, especially when you find them in the hour pillar, they are bent on world domination. They love to control things. They love to put their influence on the world in a way that their vision of the world becomes reality for a lot of people. So in other words, rather than going out and enjoying the world as it is, they like to affect the world and make it more in their own vision. And this is very typical of someone who has a dragon in the hour pillar.
I am a dragon.
Ah!
Ooh, I'm a dragon, young Earth, just like Mark.
And some of you may say, is this good or bad? And, depends on the individual and what they do with it. If you do good things,
world domination.
The thing about this man, he's got a very, very public life. And we have seen him going from a petulant adolescent, sort of insistent on having his way, to a more mature, person interested in doing good in the world. Just with the charities that he's involved in and a lot of stuff. He's still very interested in world domination.
Got a monkey in his chart, though, huh?
And he does have a monkey in his chart. So let me just go in a little bit, dive in a little bit into the monkey archetype, because we are in a monkey year.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So, your hour, your dragon, young Earth, maybe not world domination. Do you think, like in the way I look at it is I think really fast and I move really fast, so I'm very good at delegating, so that's kind of my world domination. If I'm the leader, it's like, you do this, you do that. I was a great manager in a restaurant for that aspect. Is that kind of the same thing or not?
Well, it's a little bit different. Again, you have 2 dragons in your chart. You want to paint the world in your image. And this doesn't have to be a bad thing, because you have a very positive intent. You have discovered all these wonderful mystical things that you want to share with the world so that other people can benefit from it the way that you did. Would you like everybody to see it the way that you do? Yes, of course you would. Would you push it to the point where you would do damage to someone else? Not really, because that's not your nature. So here we have this quality of the dragon, which is one of, the dragon in a lot of ways is like the ego. The ego can be destructive or it can be very positive, depending on what the person chooses to do with their ego, how they put themselves out into the world. So as far as the other aspects of what you were asking, Brenny, that has a lot more to do with the elements that are in your chart. And I can't give you complete. I don't have your chart right in front of me, and I have to admit my memory is not that good. But I could find the answer to that one within the chart. But there's another really important aspect of the chart that I do remember, is that you have two oxen in your chart. And besides needing to build a bigger barn, what it means is that you get a lot of pleasure from work. Everything having to do with work is pleasure for you. So the organizing, this, figuring out systems that work, getting involved in this, for you, this is life. This is what gives you energy and makes you happy. And as a result of that, you're bound to get really good at it, because people who enjoy what they're doing get good at it. Some people don't really like to work so hard. They only work because they have to. You work because you love it.
I think just reminded me of a saying I saw one time that says entrepreneurs are the only people that will work 80 hours so they don't have to work 40 hours for someone else.
And again, it's very important, especially with that combination of double dragon and double ox. You have to work on something that comes out of your personal vision. Mm-hmm. It can't be dictated by somebody else. That would never. And I know you've had jobs in the past, but in the long run, it never would work for someone like you.
It doesn't.
It's really quite wise that you chose a different path.
I was born an entrepreneur, and I needed to figure that one out. So
it's true. And you also had to wait till the world was ready for entrepreneurs. So now
did you just hear what he said, though? And everyone should hear this. It would be great if life worked on our time, like how we want things. But many, many times when you're frustrated and things don't work out for you, it's because there's something better coming. God, the universe, Buddha, whoever you believe in, has a bigger and better plan for you. So instead of being frustrated, don't come from a place of fear. Breathe in deep and know the universe is conspiring for you, not against you.
Always. And the universe is really wonderful at manifesting exactly what we want. Just not that great at doing it on what we decide is a timing. So we have to learn how to work with the timing that the universe offers. So this is the elemental balance for Mark Zuckerberg. You saw what the chart looked like, and you can see based on the percentages. You can see this is someone who is a very strong earth element. The way that we come up with the strength is there are numerical formulas, which used to be a nightmare for me when I used to do the charts manually, and now I have programs that calculate all this. But depending on how the numbers come out, you have a strong self element, so you have one in a normal range, or you can have one that's weak or strong. You can have one that's what we call totally weak follow, which means the rules change. You could have a totally strong follow, the rules change. Normally what we try to do is, if an element is too strong, we try to balance it by offering the other elements that will reduce it somewhat, and if in extreme cases, control it. If an element is weak, we want to nourish that element with an element that will build it up.
Yasha?
Yes.
When you look at a chart like this, and if you just looked at his day sign and his percentages, would you tell this person if they wanted to choose a joint venture partner that they would need someone that had more wood and metal to
actually, if you could do me a favor, flip to the previous chart, to the previous slide, the one right before this. Yes, because what I'm checking for now, okay, is to find out if this is a totally strong chart or just a very strong chart. And by looking at this, I can see it's just a very strong chart. Okay, and I won't go too much into the details, but this is a normally very strong chart. Okay, we can go forward. So what I would recommend is exactly what Brenny said. Beneficial elements for him would be, I wouldn't necessarily just go for the one that, oh, he's only got 1%, let's get that. But I would get someone that has metal in the chart that would help to reduce that earth. Possibly, I don't know if I would have him have a partner that was a lot of wood, because that's the controlling element for earth. And this is someone who kind of he has to be in charge. Things have to happen based on his vision. So if we were to bring in a controlling element, there would be a bit of a tug of war there. So I would recommend for this person metal, possibly water, because earth controls water, but in the process gives out a lot of its chi. So this is a nice way to sort of keep that excessive earth busy.
So Yasha,
Yes.
what would he need to look for, or 1% wood? What does that mean for him?
Well, for him, what it really means is, okay, he has 1% wood, so power does not come easy to him. And if any of you saw the film of his early days, he was kind of a nerd, who was felt kind of insecure. The women didn't pay much attention to him. His friends didn't pay much attention to him. Power did not come easily to him. So he became very determined to build himself into a position of where he would have a great deal of power. So in other words, he found a way to create his own wood element in his own chart.
Mm.
And he did very successfully. He's one of the wealthiest people on the planet. Everybody uses his stuff, and he is now, there's no one who would, make fun of him or who would, not give him the respect that he felt he was due. So this is often what happens when you have a weakness in a particular element. Depending on how it all pans out, it can actually work to your benefit. In his case, it was the motivation to build an empire. I mean, besides the fact that, it was enough that he had that dragon and he had the desire, but he also was missing this element, and he felt the lack of it, and he worked hard to create that missing element.
So one reason I wanted to bring these percentages up also is because you can see, don't ever be fearful. There are ways that we adjust the energy. This is all about understanding what you're made of. When Mark took his first breath of air, this is what he was comprised of. Everything is the 5 elements, and you are comprised of the 5 elements. That's why Yasha finds out, what time were you born and where were you born? That's why no one's chart is exactly the same, because no one is born exactly in the same place at the same time.
Exactly. And there are actually millions of different combinations of the charts, many more than some of the other methods that we use. Would you mind just going back? I wanted to say one more thing about Mark Zuckerberg's. So if, let's say, we didn't know who this was, and I was looking at this, okay, I would say this is someone who has a great deal of difficulty expressing himself because he has very little expression. And this was something that he had to develop. Now, because of his inability he was not a dynamic person, but he wanted to be, And what he did is he found an alternative way to make social connections. He was not very good with people. So he found an alternative way, and he built this whole new system. I mean, he had pretty much invented the whole idea of social networking. And he did this out of his own flaw again. And at this point, he has no trouble expressing himself because first of all, he's developed himself so he's a better speaker, but he's also created all these tools to help him. Okay, do you see how that works? It's really fascinating. Okay, we can move on. So, and by the way, I don't choose these people because I like or dislike them. I just choose them because they're high-profile people.
He's saying that because I go, Tony Robbins, why do you put his chart in here?
No, we don't want to. We don't really want to say anything negative about anybody.
I didn't say negative. I just said, why did you put his chart in here?
Okay. So anyway, this was another interesting chart. This is another rat person who, again, has the ability to organize and be the head of an organization, and he's built this amazing organization where he's at the top there, and he's got all these thousands of people out there doing all his work for him, recruiting people to come to his seminars, and now he's even got other people running his seminars, and he just created, in a lot of ways, Tony Robbins invented the self-help seminar the way that it exists today, and he made it popular. And part of it had to do with his ability as an organizer and a rat. Okay. Now this man when you really find out a little bit about who he truly is, he's he has a dog in his hour. Now, in these charts, the month and the year are more representative of how we put ourselves out into the world. The hour and the day have more to do with our inner workings. He has a dog in the hour. So what does this make him? You say, what's this guy about? On the outside, he's sort of this very outgoing. He's got a tiger there, puts him really out there. He's got a pig in the chart, which makes him really good at making connection and being the center of a lot of people. And then he's got a dog, and they are very benevolent creatures. He is someone who genuinely, regardless of whether you like his personality or not, he's someone who genuinely cares about people, and then who genuinely wants to do good for them and genuinely wants to help them.
Okay, I have to stop you now because I'm going to tell you a little story about Tony Robbins. The story of Tony Robbins is he had no money. He had just a few dollars left. He's a big dude. And he would go to the all-you-can-eat buffets and really shovel it in. He's poor. And he went to the all-you-can-eat buffet, and he's eating and eating, and he saw this little boy with his mother. And he only had enough for one or two meals left for the week. And he heard the little boy talking to his mother, and it was her birthday. And he couldn't afford to pay for her meal. And Tony Robbins gave him the money, all the money he had, so this little boy could take his mother out for her birthday. That is the dog aspect.
That is totally dog. And as you guys probably know, for years he's been running these food kitchens, where he has that organization that collects all leftover foods from restaurants. It's very big in New York City. And then they bring it to shelters. They bring it wherever people are needy. And he's been running that forever. And he's involved in a lot of philanthropic work. And even though he comes off like this kind of big, aggressive kind of a guy, you may like him, you may not, in his heart, he really cares. And he's really been motivated by wanting to do good. There's another really important aspect of the dog, and that is anxiety. Dogs tend to be anxiety prone. And one of the ways that he has dealt with his anxiety is by developing all of these tools that build confidence. Half of his work is, convincing people to be confident enough to go out and live who they know that they are. And that didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of his own genuine need to develop confidence in himself so that he would stop feeling anxious. Because, if you read his early biographies, he talks about how he was having regular anxiety all the time. So it's just very interesting if you follow,
I never thought of that. My sister's a dog, and she has anxiety attacks all the time.
And you know what you do with an anxious dog?
What?
You just have to put your arm around their shoulder and tell them, honey, everything's going to be okay.
I put them outside and tell them to go for a run.
That too. Aerobic exercise is actually very good for dogs. But yeah, I married a dog, and she is a phenomenal, amazing person who is quite accomplished and has done amazing things in her few years that she's been on this world. And part of the reason is because as a partner, I recognized that how prone she was to anxiety, and that it didn't take much to just tell her, honey, everything is going to be okay. And that's all it took. I didn't have to convince her. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to tell her everything was going to be okay. And she went about her business and did a lot of wonderful things.
So see, this is why it's important you understand the characteristics of animals, because do you see how simple it is in a very complex system to understand and apply things?
Okay.
You ready to go to the next page?
Yeah, let's look at his elements. And you can see that it's a weak
pretty balanced
fire chart, but it's a very balanced chart.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a good balance of the elements. And the reason that his self-element is weak is because, there are only two elements that increase the self-element, and there are three that reduce it.
Mm.
So wood and fire are the two that increase it, and earth, metal, and water are the ones that decrease it. So he is just fairly weak charts are usually somewhere between -100 and +100. So he's a weak fire chart, but not so much. So if we wanted to choose a beneficial element for him, we would choose wood or fire, depending on what the situation is. And also, there's another thing that's important to know. This will probably be for another time, but there are timely charts, and the elements come into play during timely charts, which will affect this balance. So whenever we do an adjustment, we look at the timely charts as well to see if, okay, maybe he's had enough of his beneficial elements. Maybe it's getting a little too strong now. Let's reduce it a little bit more. So it's kind of like, when I work with these charts, I work with the elements. It's kind of like, I used to have a pool at the last house I lived in, and you had to balance the chemicals in the pool. A little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other, and then you check it and it's perfect balance. It's kind of like that. It's kind of having a holographic view of everything that's going on, and sort of understanding, how to balance this person's life to their benefit.
I just want to make a comment for those of you that are not great at the 5 elements, or may not even, have heard about this information till today. A really simple way to understand what he was talking about, that there's 2 that are nourishing or boosting and 3 that are taking away. So he said wood and fire. Remember the nourishing cycle? Wood feeds fire. So wood and fire, because he's in the fire chart, is why he said that. And then the ones that take it away, we went through those 3 cycles. That's the earth, the metal, and the water.
And the last thing that I wanted to say, being a fire self-element, and fire being a beneficial element for him, because weak fire, so he could use more fire. Public speaking is a fire activity.
Right.
And so, what do we know him from? Standing up on stage and getting people all riled up to go out and do something positive in their life. And in a lot of ways, he's helping people, but he's also feeding his own fire, which is something that he unconsciously is realizing. So now we get to the first of our
students' charts.
Students' charts. And I'm basically, in this particular presentation, we're only addressing this part of the chart.
Right.
And this is, I've seen just the rest of Justine's chart. Maybe for another time we can do some other aspects of it. But I look at this chart, and Justine, I haven't met you, and I know Brenny knows you pretty well. But I just wanted to say what my impression was of all this. Okay, so this is a Yang Water Daymaster, but you may notice that the self-element water is only 9%. So what can we gain from this? What do we? Aside from the fact then there's certain health implications which are not really serious. They can be managed pretty easily. We say, well, this is a mid-range chart. This is not even a weak chart. Yet she only has 9% water. What does this mean? And the answer is right there. If we look at the preceding element, which is we call the resource element, or the element that feeds the self-element, we can quickly see she has an enormous amount of metal. And that for some reason the number disappeared. But I can see from what's here, we have 20, it's at least 35-40% metal, the chart. But it's an enormous amount of metal. And that's where all of that water energy is coming from. That's how she manages, with only 9% water, to have a mid-range chart. In other words, a balanced chart, an even chart. And someone with a mid-range chart will tend to be even-tempered. They would tend to not be very reactive, and when it comes to emotions, it usually moves. There's a certain ease of movement about it. There isn't like a kind of very reactive kind of an energy. So what are some of the qualities of well, we'll get to the qualities of water in a bit, but so there's a couple of things here. One thing about I could say about Justine, she's not a very self-centric person. Because she's not someone who puts herself above others. She is someone who works well with other people. She often thinks about other people's interests before she thinks about her own. And in a way, it's a good quality, but it's also something that needs to be balanced and not go too far that way. So I would tell Justine to think about what you need before you start to think about what other people need. It's great to be generous, but generosity has to start in the home. And you have to take care of your needs because you have a tendency of taking care of other people's needs first. Okay, the other thing that I can tell just by looking at the element balance is resource. Okay, so I would ask Justine, and it's a lot easier if I had Justine here, if what sort of relationship did she have with her parents? Because with all of that resource, I would guess her parents tended to be a little bit overprotective and controlling. Okay, and if that, I would ask her because I never take anything for granted. And if she said yes, they were kind of domineering and controlling. We could start to talk about, that's a whole other conversation, and we could talk about that. Because very often when you have a self element that has a small amount and a resource that's very large, it implies that a lot of her strength has come from her family, but that she's also had to sacrifice some of her own qualities in order to be part of that family. So that would be a whole other conversation we could have about how to deal with that. I also would see someone who should be cultivating her ability to express herself because she doesn't have a lot of expression in the chart. And that could be anything. Expression is wood in her chart. So I would recommend, because writing is a wood activity, I would recommend, first of all, that she keep a diary. She probably does already. And that she really start to develop an ability to write about things. It could be anything. It could start with articles that she could share on Facebook or through a newsletter. It could be she can write a book about something that's an area of interest for her. All of these things would increase the amount of wood in her chart and the amount of expression that she has in her chart. And by doing that, she would also be increasing the wealth in her life. Because whatever wood activities are happening, and whatever she's doing to increase the wood in her life, also will feed the wealth in her life, which is fine.
We're working on putting a webinar together for her.
Terrific.
So that would be what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to say is that since fire is her wealth element, and webinars happen to be a fire activity,
right?
Not everyone can make a profitable webinar, but in her case, it probably will lead to a nice increase in her wealth. Okay, and since we're on wealth, I wanted to clarify a couple of things about wealth. In this system, wealth is not just money; it's not just coin. It's wealth is our rewards in life. So wealth could be having a wonderful family, could be having wonderful friends, it could be having a wonderful home. It could be a car that you love. That is very special. Whatever we get to decide what our rewards in life are.
Right. Wealth in America, you think of money, but we call it all good blessings.
That's right. All good blessings. That's a great way to say it. And that's really what real wealth, and as people who were very good at accumulating, over the years, I've had many different types of clients. I have one who I became friends with after a while, who is CEO of a hedge fund, and he accumulates billions of dollars. And I've had many conversations with him about wealth, and he said, the real happiness in his life is not the money; it's the relationship. He has a wonderful relationship with his family. He has a large extended family. He throws parties for his friends, not to impress, but just to have them all gathered around him and feel their energy, because it's one of the greatest blessings in his life. And he said the money is, if he had the money alone, he would be miserable.
Well, how many people are miserable that are rich? They think that money's going to make them happy. But all money is a tool to do the things you want to do and to help the people you want to help. It's not a negative thing. So if you're thinking it's negative, stop thinking that way. And guys, guess what it is? It's a tree with ink on it. Got better.
Yes.
We just went to sacred geometry. It's a number that's passed electronically, a 0 or a 1. You know,
Exactly.
that's all it is. So if you can recalibrate your brain's thought process on money and look at like, the more money I get, the better. God wants you, the universe wants you to have everything, all good blessings. We're the ones that stop it. And that's
Yes.
paradigms, and that's not understanding your chart and making poor decisions.
And I wanted to add about this friend of mine with the hedge fund, because you know, he, in a lot of ways, the people that we serve can become our greatest teachers. And you know, in my mind, the amount of cash that he is able to accumulate is beyond my understanding, quite practical understanding. Because one of the things that I'd asked him was, would you give it up? Would you give up all this? You know? And he said, well, if I had to give up, if I had to make a choice between something else that mattered more to me and this, I probably would give it up. But would I give it up for no reason? No, this is great. You know, the world has become his playground, you know, and you know, so money can be a wonderful thing. You know, it doesn't ever have to be the ugly thing that certain people make it out of their fear of not having enough. And that includes very rich people and very poor people. These are the two groups that have the greatest amount of fear about money. So as long as you think of money as your loving friend, you can only expand with the amount of money that you start to accumulate.
I'm open and willing to receive all the abundance of the universe now.
Brenny, I want that for you so much.
Hey, Yasha, we've been going about an hour. Why don't we do this as part 1? But
yes.
For those that have watched to this point,
Well, can we just finish, Justine? I have one more page.
Oh, okay, because I looked and there was like, we're about halfway through, so I thought this would be a good place we'll go through the rest of Justine's, then we can give them a link where they can go look at the charts that you're offering. The special's going to go till Sunday at midnight to get that special price. And then we'll come back and we'll do some more charts, because everybody knows I do not like webinars over an hour, because I've been on webinars 3-4 hours long and it's like, you just can't focus.
Yeah.
This is great information. Okay, so let's finish and go on here. You want to go to the next page and talk about water?
So one of the important things is, you know, there's a couple of pages. I just want to go through all of Justine's pages and then we'll stop. So just to give you an idea of like, what are the qualities of water? And I'm sure from Brenny, you've had so much of it. And this is just my own version, my writing and so on. And I urge you to have a look, you know. And one of the most important things about water people is they're very, very good with their emotions. You know, they know how to deal with their own emotions. They know how to influence people with their emotions. And they're very good at communicating through emotions. You know, so this is really where a lot of their power is. Next, please.
Well, I love it because you have in there, and if you study 5 elements, people, excellent speaking and listening. Yes. Water element, throat chakra, blue, speaking, listening, the ears, the kidneys, that's what it's got to do with the organ there.
Yes, ma'am.
And also, fear, which is the emotion. Mm-hmm.
And also the idea that water is able to get into every nook and cranny. And water is really unstoppable. That's the thing about water people. When they decide they want to do something, it doesn't matter how many obstacles you put in their way, they find a way around it. And the imagery is, you know, water always finds its way back to the ocean, which is its source or source energy, you know, and they're always coming back home to the ocean, no matter what obstacles are in their way. So these are some of the qualities of water, and you know, you probably learned a lot of these from Brenny, but it's it's worthwhile to have it in front to look at. And also,
Yasha, it's good to be reminded of all these things all the time. I mean, this is just You guys, the 5 elements is part of life. It's part of feng shui. It's part of life. So we're going to talk about it over and over and over and over. And then you're going to understand yourself and life a whole lot better.
And if I do a chart for you, you will have it all organized in a simple packet that you can refer to anytime. And then the last part of it, we discussed a little bit about the organs, but there's also other associations. The sense that's related to water is hearing. Water nourishes the bones. It expands into the hair on the head. The fluid that is associated with water is urine. You might have guessed that one. The smell is putrid. The temperament is one of fear. This is one of the qualities of water people, which is when things go wrong, they can be very fearful. And unlike, when I said the dog, you just have to tell them everything's okay. They develop their own mechanisms for dealing with their fears. We all have fears, and they come from time to time. And it's really important to develop a mechanism to deal with fear so that it doesn't stop us. So we can get back to our natural state, which is one of joy and love and sharing. And what happens eventually, water people, because they're so willing to deal with their fears, eventually they become really so good at it that they can teach other people how to deal with it. The flavor is salty, the sound is brown, weather is cold, development is storage. Your water, they always talk about winter, how the winter stores energy and then it explodes into spring. The beneficial grain, and this is really helpful. If you have a deficiency, you happen to have a deficiency in water, or you happen to be a water element, a beneficial, they call this a grain, but it's actually something more than a grain. But beans are very good for you. And the beneficial meat, surprisingly, if you're not vegan, is pork. And
what do beans look like? Oh, they look like a kidney.
They do.
Which is the ear.
Do you think there's any accident they put pork and beans together in a can?
Oh, you're brilliant. I didn't think of that. Pork and beans are for water people. And you can eat it cold.
Yes, especially water people.
Salty.
Especially water people who live alone.
And you may be fearful of, what is that technical word they call it? Flatulence.
Yeah. And often water people who don't live alone, if they eat enough pork and beans, they end up living alone.
And it might give you, because you're a water element, that could be your gas to get you down the river. See, guys, how fun you can have doing
Yeah, we're having too much fun, Brady.
What's new there? Okay, so this is Suzanne's. We're going to stop here because everybody needs a break. And the people that are helping me with my pelvis and hips unlocking, because I sit too much, said I need to get up and walk around. So look for part 2. Yasha, let's tell them how they can, what is the link to your website? And I will actually go to the website. Just let me see. I want to get this.
Well, I gave you a link for the special offer, which would be nice to discuss right around now.
Right, but what I'm saying, that was on the other program.
Okay.
So is it just for the number 4 Pillars of Destiny? What's a website, please? I'm doing screen.
Okay. If you want to go to my website at 4pillarshoroscope.com. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll make sure that the special offer is.
Well, we'll be sending that out. I'm just putting it here for now so they can see the page.
Sure, 4pillarshoroscope.com. And if you do visit, be sure to click the link for the Year of the Monkey, because that'll give you so much information about what fun times we will have this year.
The Year of the Monkey. Here we go. Click on that little monkey. And it's going to tell you about what's going on this year. This is good for you to know. Strap on your seatbelt and get plenty of rest. Okay, so that is 4pillarshoroscope.com. FOURPILLARSHOROSCOPE.com. 4pillarshoroscope.com. check that out. We will be back with part 2. So go drink some water.